Hello everyone, this is Jotto bringing you the HearthStone Weekly, bringing you the top decks, bringing you the most interesting cards and my opinions on the state of the metagame for this week's tournament. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? First of all, the honourable mentions. We had 9th place Always High, 10th place Montags TFU, 11th place Draxlayer, 12th place Spage _TFU, and 13th place Bike TFU. On to the top 8, we had 1st place Holy Snova, 2nd place Aimless Gun, 3rd place IBM Moon, 4th place Space Wizard, 5th place Purple Taste, 6th place Eromezis, 7th place SAR7, 8th place Kistafa. So, starting with Kistava's Priest Midrange deck, and sorry if I completely messed up your name. I'm not quite sure how to say that. Kistafer, whatever. Anyway, so this is a pretty standard Priest midrange deck, playing some late game, things like Ragnaros and Ysera, playing some early game, things like Injured Blade Master, which has been a real breakout card since the patch. It's been seeing a lot of play in aggro decks and Priest midrange decks with some Warlock decks because they have the healing. But anyway, let's go through the deck, shall we? We have the standard things: Sentient Shieldmaster, Shadow Word Pain and Death, Acidic Swamp Oozes, Thought Steal, Injured Blade Master, as I said, Holy Fire Sunwalker, the Black Knight. These are pretty established mid-range cards. Now, the interesting things are two of the breakout card of the tournament, which was Fairy Dragon, a card which has been seeing a lot of play in some aggro decks in the past. I used to play it a lot. No one else seemed to, but I used to play it in all of my decks. I think it's an amazing card. I think it's the best 2-drop in the game, personally. No one else seems to have sort of played it until the breakout of Priest. But there's so many Priests right now, and Fairy Dragon practically dismantles Priest single-handedly. So we have the 2 copies of Fairy Dragon, which are very good against the Mirror and also against Mages. On top of that, we have the 2 of Northshire Cleric that everyone seems to hate because it's a 1-3 for 1. Super good, unless you're playing against it. Very powerful, good draw engine. The Twilight Drake, the new Twilight Drake, a very consistent card now. It's no longer useless when silence, it still hits for 4. Very sort of versatile card now. Bigger Chillwind Yeti, you could say. On to 7th place, SAR's deck. Another Priest deck. This is more early mid-game Priest deck, still playing the Northshire Clerics and Senjins and Mind Controls and Sunwalker and things like that. But it's also playing a Cabal Shadow Priest. Yes, it helps them get through a lot of taunt things, like Taunt Totem, for example, or Shield Bearer is one of the ones that doesn't show up as much. It gets rid of Feral Spirits. Nice tech to add once every while. Arcanized Soul Priest, sort of the mid-range minion for Priest. Boulder Fist Ogre, card which played decently well in this tournament. There were a couple of Boulder Fist Ogres in top 8. It's just because it's so large, it doesn't die to Big Game Hunter. Very good as a beat stick if you want one. Late game. Still Shadow Madness. Acolyte of Pain helps with the draw power along with the Northshire Clerics. Northshire Cleric? You only have 2. Why not just play a 3rd one? Iron Beacon Owl, obligatory silence is obligatory, and Acidic Swamp Oozes, obligatory weapon destruction is obligatory. The other tech I want to go over here is Wild Pyromancer, a card which has basically been forgotten. Now, Wild Pyromancer is an incredibly powerful 2-drop that a lot of people don't play because when you first look at the card, it doesn't look that insane just because it damages your own stuff as well. However, if you're playing Priest and you heal it up or Power Word Shield it, it gets rather out of hand rather quickly. 6th place, Eromezis, a Warrior and Rage deck. Now, I haven't seen a Warrior and Rage deck in ages. We have Garish Hellscream, Inner Rage, Cruel Taskmaster, Battle Rage, Shield Block. A lot of various ways of enraging and doing tons of damage. We also have a lot of legendaries in this deck. This deck ain't cheap. We have a Ysera and a Ragnaros, the 2 breakout legendaries from the tournament. We have a Black Knight as usual, very powerful card. Karn Bloodhoof also played a decent chunk. Faceless Manipulator Brawl, Sylvanas Windrunner, these are very good mid-range to late game legendaries. 2 of Fairy Dragon, because that seems to be obligatory in this tournament. Standard things like Fiery War Axe, Execute, Shield Slam, These are basically warrior cards that you need, and with the new battle rage, it's kind of insane. So I expected a warrior deck to do this well. It definitely did this well, and it's insane that I managed to get this far with such a sort of old archetype. That it just shows that the old archetypes still work with the new changes. On to 5th place, Purple Taste, Shaman Midrange deck. The deck which refuses to go away and will be in every single top 8 until the end of time. Now, this is a slightly more interesting variation on the Shaman Midrange deck, which is nice to see. Playing things like Emperor Cobra, a card which is very neglected, but there's less Divine Shield nowadays, so it does get in for a lot. Dark Iron Dwarf, been very powerful recently. Boulder Fist Ogre, again, nice beat stick. You have the Harrison Jones instead of the Acidic Swamp Oozes, because they need card draw off that. Still have the 1 Ooze, but 1 Ooze, 1 Harrison is better than 2 Oozes, because the Ooze helps with early game. Harrison Jones comes down, even if they don't have weapons, he's a 5/4, very useful. Shattered Sun Cleric, a card that's been making the rounds recently. 1 of Lightning Storm, you need it. 1 of Stormforge Axe can be very versatile in these mid-range decks. An interesting choice here is instead of running Lightning Bolt, running Rockbiter Weapon. Now, Rockbiter Weapon deals with Fairy Dragon. It also can save you some life if you put it on some things. If you have Wind Fury, it's very useful. But primarily, the difference is Lightning Bolt can be taunted. Lightning Bolt can't be taunted. Rockbiter can be, but Rockbiter can kill Fairy Dragon. Lightning Bolt can't, and Lightning Bolt has Overload. Rockbiter doesn't. So a lot of people pick Lightning Bolt. Rockbiter is an understandable choice. Most people run both, but Rockbiter is an understandable choice, especially with how common Fairy Dragon is nowadays. On to 4th place. Is this a Warlock control deck? A control deck made top 4? This has been an archetype that hasn't appeared in a long time. The last person who got a Warlock control deck into top 4 was Noxious, who I think he won the first ever beta tournament for HearthStone with a Warlock control deck, but since then no one plays it because it doesn't tend to work. But Space Wizard comes out with his deck tech, it's what he's known for, and he comes out with a Warlock control deck that works. Kudos to him for that. We still have the standard things like Voidwalker, Argent Commander, Sen'jin Shieldmaster, Lord Jaraxxus, these standard things. Then we have 2 of Twisting Nether, Shadow Flame, Blood Knight, synergize with your thing, but also helps get rid of some Divine Shields on their side of the board as well, especially against things like Argent Commander, or when absorbing your Argent Commander shields. Malagos, a card which isn't seen much at all. Karn Bloodhoof synergizes amazingly with Shadow Flame, helps along with controlling the board to keep your Karn essentially. 6 Swamp Oozes deal with other Jaraxxus weapons, Doom Hammers, and things like that. Acidic is insane, we don't need to go over that. Soulfire, Spellbreaker, there's a lot of controlling elements to this deck, but it doesn't have problems killing you because it has a couple of different win conditions, a lot of beaters in the mid to late game. It's a very well-rounded control deck. 3rd place, Moon, playing Mage aggro. Now, this is a deck which, if anyone's been playing on the ladder recently, is everywhere. This is Moon's masterpiece, so to speak, which he came up with last week. And last week he came out with this interesting aggro deck, which was essentially an archetype no one's ever tried before, with things like Dark Iron or Shattered Sun Cleric. These are everywhere now. He just happened to be the only one who managed to get top 8, but if you look at the tournament, there's tons of them everywhere, because this is a very powerful archetype. Do not underestimate this. Now, Moon's version has the 1 Pyroblast now, it has Azure Drakes instead of Gadget Sands, but things like Dark Iron Dwarf, Shattered Sun Cleric, Acolyte, Pain, Mana Worm, Sorcerer's Apprentice, these are all still here. Moon's version is incredibly well refined, running everything as a 2-drop apart from the Ooze, because you don't need 2 Oozes, and 1 Pyroblast, because you don't need 2 Pyroblasts. Very well refined deck. Probably the strongest of all the Mage aggro decks out there, which is understandable because he created the archetype. On to 2nd place. Aimless Gun playing a Warlock aggro deck. Now we've seen Aimless Gun bring various variations on the Warlock aggro deck, and this is the latest one post-patch. Now, the thing I'm going to talk about here the most is 2 cards. Pitlord, the new Pitlord, which I fully expected to get into this deck. It's a very powerful 4-drop, incredibly powerful in these aggro decks. way stronger than Felguard was at 3 mana. It's incredibly good. It kills Senjin. It walks over pretty much everything. It gets in for 5 a turn. It kills Chillwind Yeti. Massacres most Twilight Drakes. It's an amazing 4-drop. Very powerful now. The other one I want to talk about is Venture Co Mercenary. Now, Venture Co Mercenary is a 7/6/5. And in this deck has 0 downside because there's not much you play for that much. I mean, it stops you from playing your Doomguard and your Pitlord, and that's it. The rest of the stuff you can still play, still awesome. It's a 7/6, so not being able to play your Doomguard doesn't matter half the time. You still have all your controlling spells, so you can get rid of things, and all your smaller things like Flame Imp and Raging Worgen, and it's just a well-rounded out deck. He's tested this to the nth degree, essentially. Nice to see that one-off Pitlord in there. Onto the first place deck, Holy Snova playing a Paladin weapon midrange. Now this is a new archetype. Now this uses, or abuses you could say, the Captain Greenskin, the new one. Captain Greenskin is an upgrade for Paladin. Now, True Silver Champion is already arguably the best weapon in the game. If you put turn 4 True Silver and then turn 5 Greenskin, you kill their Senjin, and then you kill whatever else they put in to block it, and you gain 6 life out of this thing, and they can't play anything. And Greenskin now hits for 5 a turn, and they can't play anything. That True Silver becomes an Ashbringer. I just want to point this out. The True Silver becomes an Ashbringer with an upside. That's crazy. It is an insane weapon if you get a Captain Greenskin out now. Other things in here though, Black Knight, Ysera, Sword of Justice is crazy with Captain Greenskin. Oh wow, a 2/6. The extra durability is amazing. Captain's Parrot, sort of search out to Captain Greenskin. Acidic Swamp, who is obligatory. Elder Peacekeeper, essentially the Paladin Assassinate. Best used on things with effects, because if they silence the Elder Peacekeeper buff, they have to silence their own buff. Consecration, pretty much obligatory. Azure Drake, very powerful. Hammer of Wrath, nice removal. Shadowed Sunclair is everywhere. Argent Commander, incredibly powerful. Ysera and the Ragnaros. I'll talk about them now, but Ysera and Ragnaros are a combination where people wanted a late game engine. So what do? They play Ysera and Ragnaros. Because that's one hell of a late game engine. You get your turn 8 Ragnaros, does 8 damage to something, gets removed, then you go to Ysera, they don't have a second removal, you get card advantage out of Ysera, and both of those cards win the game on their own. Ragnaros gets removed most likely. Ysera, if you curve them, Ysera wins the game on its own. Because if they had to dedicate that much to kill Ragnaros, it means Ysera is going to get 1 or 2 or 3 activations, and as soon as you pull that Ysera Awakens, the game is over, essentially. It's a very powerful card, it wins the game on its own. Nice to see it come into competitive play now. Metagame seems to have slowed down a bit, so Ragnaros and Ysera can make it into these decks. Now, onto Pitlord. Now, I was just gonna go over Pitlord again quickly, where Pitlord used to be a 7/5 that dealt 7 damage to you. The problem is it died to Big Game Hunter. It died to Fireball. Still dies to Fireball, but it died to things like Fireball and you took 7. It got sapped and you took another 7. It died to Spell-Powered It died to Spell-Powered Mortal Strikes and Hammer of Wrath plus like a 2-drop. It died to a lot of things and it kept dealing 7 damage to you all the time. It wasn't good. Now they bumped up the health 1. They took down the attack 2. It doesn't die to Big Game Hunter. It still gets through Senjin. It doesn't die to anything apart from Fireball now. Incredibly versatile. Very powerful now. 5 damage is nothing. This will give you card advantage. Just because of how hard it is to remove this thing. Not to mention, 5 damage to a Warlock is not that much. 7 damage is a lot. 7 damage was almost a third of your life total. 5 damage, much more manageable. 6th, not quite half, but it's getting there. It really is getting there. Pitlord is incredibly powerful now in those aggro decks. Might fit in control decks now. I'm not quite sure. It's a very powerful threat to play in these aggro decks. And I want to see more of it, essentially. It's an aggro card which requires a bit more thought when to play, because if you're on the back foot, you can't play it. So it really goes in these aggro decks where they just want to put down as many threats that are hard to remove. It doesn't die to any kind of AoE. Very powerful card in these aggro decks. Harrison Jones, also known as Indiana Weapon Destruction. Now, Acidic Swamp Ooze is the go-to weapon destruction because it costs so little. Harrison Jones, however, is a tech for those decks that just don't have draw power. So, if a deck has very little draw power and dies to weapons, i.e. aggro decks, they play Harrison Jones along with one Ooze. Because the Ooze deals with the early weapons, Harrison Jones deals with those weapons that just stop aggro decks, things like Doomhammer, True Silver. Drawing one card off True Silver is not a bad thing. Drawing one card off True Silver, not a bad thing. You reduce one activation, that's 2 life, you keep one of your minions, and it cycles. It's nice as your Drake at that point. Your Drake cycles, this cycles a lot of the time, but instead of having a +1 spell power, it has an extra attack. Interesting card to play as a 5-drop. I want to see more of this. It was played a lot back in the Jirax's Doomhammer days. Those cards aren't played as much, but I feel like this still has some use in the metagame. On to Captain Greenskin, the breakout legendary. This has been making it into a lot of combo decks. Now, Ysera and Ragnaros with the 2 legendaries pretty much dominated the tournament along with the Black Knight. However, Captain Greenskin is a card which we went over the mana cost, and I stand by it. It's an incredible buff. Giving a weapon +1/+1 is incredibly powerful because instead of drawing a card, you kill something bigger, you get an extra activation. In the case of Gorehowl, you suddenly hit them for 8 in the face and keep your weapon. It's incredible. You can search for it with Captain's Parrot. The only legendary where you can play effectively 2 copies in your deck. You play your Captain's Parrot, search for your Greenskin, play your Greenskin, get an upgrade on your True Silver. It's amazing. You just go turn 2 Captain's Parrot, turn 3 another threat, turn 4 True Silver, turn 5 Captain Greenskin. Very powerful, worth playing now, can be used to extreme effect. Not in rogue decks, he's too slow for rogue. But in Warrior and Paladin specifically, he's extraordinarily powerful. So, basically, now we have a very interesting setup where the US metagame has stabilized quite well. We have sort of a couple of aggro decks, we have mainly mid-range, 1 or 2 control decks. It's interesting to see control and aggro make a bit of a comeback after the mid-range domination. Mid-range is still sort of dominating a bit, but aggro is coming back, control making a splash. It's nice to see these archetypes come back. They're not sort of broken on mid-range anymore. However, as far as classes goes, there's still a severe lack of rogues. People still don't want to play rogues. Severe lack of hunters, something else has been happening a lot. Rogue and hunter have not been played recently because rogue is a hero that not many people want to play because of their playstyle now, and they're a little bit on the weak side besides one deck. Hunter is, there's one effective hunter deck, which is Unleash the Hounds. The problem is there's nothing else effective, and Unleash the Hounds is quite unreliable. If you don't draw your Unleash the Hounds, you die. So a lot of people don't play it in tournaments. So currently we've got 2 classes that people just don't want to play. And then the rest of the classes are really healthy, they're really well balanced. I really like what Blizzard did with the rest of the classes. Just Rogue got hit a little bit too hard. Hunters need some sort of rework in some way. Need to be buffed up a bit, need Unleash the Hounds to be reworked, make them less gimmicky, more consistent. Hunter Control is an archetype that can work, but it's just not played. Hunter Control is not popular. Hunter Beast is where it's at right now because of Unleash the Hounds. I really would like Blizzard to sort of redesign that class a bit, because Hunter Control is one of my favorite archetypes, but it just doesn't have what it needs now. But anyway, onto the EU tournament. I'll just go over it quickly. There was a top 16 in that tournament because there was 60 people participating. But more importantly, if you look at the top 16, there is 3/4 priest and shaman everywhere. Now, I'm not sure if this will stabilize, but it just seemed that the longer the tournament, the worse it gets as far as priest and shaman goes. In that tournament, there were 1 or 2 warlocks, 1 or 2 hunters. Everything else pretty much was priest and shaman. There were so many shaman and priest mirrors in top 16, and that's not really a state you want to be in. But unlike with the US metagame, where you can sort of see that something's up because it's been pretty healthy and it's been going for a while, with the EU one, they're still sort of stabilizing, so we'll have to see what happens next week. and then I'll give my full opinions on what's going on as far as the EU metagame goes next week at the end of the show. But anyway, as for now, this has been Jotto. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback or suggestions, write them in the comment section below. If you want to come chat to me, come on TeamSpeak. I'll put the information for Mana Grind in the info and description. But as for now, this has been Jotto signing off.